Meaghan, I'm an alcoholic, and
Hi, Megan.
this is actually my first time online meeting. I don't haven't done this before. My sobriety date is April 8th of 2009. I have a home group and a sponsor, and I am a sponsor, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm grateful to be able to be a part of this, because this is like way past my bedtime, but I really believe in service to Alcoholics Anonymous. It is like the foundation of my sobriety. I come from a family with a lot of alcoholism. I don't know that I ever saw normal drinking when I was a kid. So alcoholic behavior seemed normal, right? And so when I started drinking, the first time I really got drunk, I was like 12 or 13 years old. I had gone to a school dance, and I got into a fight with this girl. And after the dance, she invited me to a party at her house. And I didn't like that girl, and she didn't like me, but I went because I knew I was going to get drunk. And so I went to that party, and I got drunk, and I threw up, and I fell down, and I had this really amazing experience, right? I was a kid who was anxious and afraid all the time, and I was terrified of germs, and I was obsessive, and I had all kinds of anxiety, and I got drunk, and all of that went away. Alcohol had this like magnificent effect on my stress level, and I fell in love with it right away, and I started chasing it. And that night I jumped in a pool that had like a dead rat floating in it, and it was a liberating experience, right? And I chased it. I spent as much time with that girl as I could. I drank as often as I could. I was in middle school, so it wasn't as often as I would have liked. But I started failing classes in school, and I quit the swim team. And already, like, alcohol was already the most important thing in my life. And so I was drinking a lot, and my family had sort of noticed. And so by the time I was 15, I got kicked out of high school. I had been arrested several times. I had this boyfriend who told me that if I kept drinking, he was going to break up with me. And so I decided I was going to stop drinking, and it lasted like a couple of months before I started drinking again. But also at that time, my older sister got sober, and she was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started, when she would give me rides to places, right, I would call her and say, hey, can you give me a ride to this party? And she would be like, sure, but first we have to go to this meeting. So if you want to ride, you have to come sit with me. And so she would drag me to AA. And I had no idea why she was bringing me to AA, and I had no idea what you people were doing here. I just saw it as a major inconvenience to my life. But I did. I came and I sat in meetings, and I'm really grateful for that also, because by the time I made it here, I was comfortable here. And then I kept drinking. At 17, I tried to get sober again. My mother had gotten a restraining order on me because of my behavior, and I had to move in with my older sister who was sober. And by that time, my little sister had gotten sober also, and so I was going to meetings with them, but I didn't really want to be sober, so I wasn't really doing any work. And I stayed sober for a while, like somewhere between 6 and 9 months, and I picked up again. I went to this party with these people that I worked with, and I had told everybody, my best friend, that I didn't want to have more than 2 drinks. And I think that I picked that up in AA, but I'm not really sure. It's not a thing that I would have ever said to anybody. But I said to her, I haven't drank in a while, so like, don't let me have more than 2 drinks. And she was like, sure, Meaghan, whatever. And so we went to this party, and I was on my second drink already, and I knew it wasn't going to be enough. And so every time she went to the bathroom or she went outside to smoke, I would like run upstairs and take shots real quick and then run back down and try to pretend like I was still on my second drink. And I like threw up, and I fell down, and I got in a fist fight, and I made a fool of myself, and I acted inappropriately. And I woke up the next morning, and I was like, man, why did I ever stop drinking? Right? It was the best time. And so I started drinking every day again. And by the time I was 19 years old, I was in Boston Children's Hospital dying of liver failure. And I agreed to go to meetings upon my release from the hospital. And so my sisters took me to AA, and I went to the first meeting I went to was a Monday night meeting in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And it was a back to basics meeting. So it was just a speaker discussion about, getting sober. And I walked in, and the person who was speaking was somebody that I used to get drunk with, and I hadn't seen him in a while because he had gone to jail for leaving court-ordered rehab. And I was shocked, right? I was like, what are you doing here? And he was like, I'm speaking. I just got 3 months sober. What are you doing here? And I didn't really have an answer. I didn't have any desire to be sober. I didn't want to be there, but I showed up. I went to 2 or 3 meetings a day because I was working part-time. I got a sponsor who I called every day and complained about my life, but didn't really do anything else with. And at 2.5 months sober, I went to a party, and I did the whole thing that I had been doing. I was telling everybody I'm an alcoholic, I don't drink, I'm sober, blah, 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 right? And then somebody walked in, and he said, dude, you're Irish, you're supposed to be an alcoholic. And I was like, you know what? I feel like you're right. And so I called my sponsor and told her, hey, I'm going to drink. You told me to call you. So I just want to let you know I'm going to drink. And she was like, how about you go to the bathroom and take out your white chip and pray? And so I hung up the phone, and I turned to that kid, and I said, pour me a shot. And I went to the bathroom, and I took out my white chip, and I said, God, I'm going to drink. And I went back to the kitchen, and I took the shot. And I drank more than I should have. I threw up. I blacked out. I got in a fist fight. I acted inappropriately. And that was April 7th of 2009. And so I woke up the next day, and it was 2:00 in the afternoon, and I was late for work. And it happened to be a Wednesday, and my home group was Wednesday, and I sold raffle tickets at that meeting. So I called my sister, and I asked her to come pick me up and bring me to the meeting. I had no intention of staying sober that day, but I have not picked up a drink since. And a lot of things have happened in the last 10 years. I got a new sponsor right away, and I started reading the big book, and I started getting more involved with the steps. I didn't do really any step work, but I was reading about them, and I started going to step meetings. I stopped going to parties, and I dated a lot of boys, and I bought a lot of shoes, and I got a lot of tattoos, and I stayed sober for a whole year. And I got to a year sober, and I thought that everything was just going to be better, right? I had it in my head that when people said things like, don't stop before the miracle happens, that meant I just had to make it to a year and everything was going to be okay. And everything was not okay. I was sober. My life was relatively together. I was making good money. I had a nice place to live. But I was miserable and irritable, restless, and discontented, and I could not find happiness at all. And so I went to a young people's conference. I went to ECPA, which is the Eastern Area Conference, and it was in Burlington, Vermont. and I drove up there, and I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know really how to find anybody once I got there, and I had no idea really. And her name was Christy, and I asked her to be my sponsor. Um, and so Christy started taking me through the big book, and she took me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it absolutely changed my life. You know, I found through that work a peace and serenity that I didn't know existed, right? And and a baseline for all of the things that were to come, right? I found a solution that helps me get through most every problem I face. You know, it hasn't been like rainbows and butterflies since then. That woman that saved my life, that took me through 12 steps, eventually relapsed and then died. And then I got to move out of the country and live in paradise for a while. I got to get married and got to get divorced, and I've got to move all over the place and have beautiful, wonderful new experiences and sad, tragic experiences. You know, I've been to a lot of funerals and a lot of weddings, and Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that I never knew I wanted. You know, I hated AA when I came here, and I was like a nuisance in meetings. You know, I would interrupt speakers, and I threw chairs, and I would get in fights. And today, Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important thing in my life. You know, service to AA has saved my life also, which is why I'm here. You know, I normally am in bed an hour and a half before this meeting starts, but I believe in being of service, because really that's what saved me, right? Having a commitment to Alcoholics Anonymous got me to the meeting that night. And which is why I serve on Ikipa. I love being of service to AA. I love that it is challenging. I love that it constantly forces me to look at myself and see where I can be better. And I love being a part of the future of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is what I love about Young People's AA. So with that, I think I will end it. And thank you for asking me to speak.